guys, this is Joel Kennedy with Kennedy Violins. You ever have trouble keeping your bow straight? Well, today I'm going to show you a few things that's going to make it way easier. So guys, one of the basic challenges of playing a bowed stringed instrument is being able to keep your bow straight. Now, why do we want to keep our bow straight to begin with? Well, it's because we want to be in control of our bow, because we want to be in control of the contact point, right? The contact point is where your bow contacts the string of your instrument. So whether you're here towards the fingerboard or you're here towards the bridge, it's very important, because if you can control your contact point, then you have control over how loud or quietly you play. You have control over the quality of your sound. Do you want to play with a warm sound, a sweet sound, dark sound, a focused sound, an airy sound, right? So everything to do with the quality of sound that you create is highly dependent on that contact point. And that contact point can change if your bow goes crooked, right? So if we draw our bow and it goes crooked, then, oh no, we're playing on the fingerboard, or oh no, we're playing on the bridge, and now my sound, sounds like we're killing cats or something, So we want to keep that bow really, really straight. So how do we do that? Okay, so there's three primary things that you want to remember when trying to play with a straight bow. Okay, number one is that your arm is separated into two distinct parts. You have your bicep and you have your forearm. Okay, these two parts have to work a certain way. So you have to be aware that you have your bicep and you have your forearm. Okay, the second thing is that the bicep and the forearm will function differently depending on where you are in the bow. So what your bicep does and what your forearm does depends on whether you're at the frog or you're at the tip of your bow. Number three, the third thing that you want to remember as far as the basic mechanics of your bow arm is that any locked joints are bad. I've mentioned this in many of my videos, but a locked joint equals tension, and it also equals, immobility. So you don't want locked joints. Now there is one exception that a very adept YouTuber pointed out last week, actually. The thumb on your left hand, it's okay if that joint doesn't move. Why? Because we don't need it to function as a joint, and that's the reason why. But most all the joints in your body, when you're playing your instrument, we need them to function as joints. That means they need to be able to move. That means they cannot be straight, because when they're straight, they can't move. It causes tension, causes rigidity, causes all kinds of problems. So in our bow arm, it's the same thing. Now the number one joint in our bow arm that can cause the biggest challenge for us in keeping our bow straight is the elbow, right? So we don't want to lock any joint, our shoulder, our elbow, our wrist, our fingers. We don't want to lock any joint, but the elbow is the biggest culprit. So most of the time when you're playing with a crooked bow, it's because you've locked this elbow, you've prevented this elbow from moving, and that has made your bow go crooked, okay? Okay, so how do we use our bow arm? Okay, there's four primary things you got to remember in terms of how to properly use your bow arm. Okay, number one, on the down bow, we start the stroke with our bicep. So we initiate the stroke with the bicep, okay? Then we complete the stroke with our forearm, right here. I'll say that again. We start the stroke with our bicep, we complete the stroke with our forearm. So you want to think of your arm being in those two distinct parts. Bicep, forearm. Bicep, forearm. Okay, number two is the opposite. When you do an up bow, the stroke begins with your forearm and is completed by your bicep. It starts with your forearm, is completed by your bicep. So if you could see the whole thing, right, it would be bicep, forearm, forearm, bicep. Bicep, forearm, forearm, bicep, okay? Okay, so the third thing that you want to remember is that, which I alluded to before, is that you must keep that elbow open. You must keep that elbow relaxed. You must allow that elbow to move, right? So obviously, if your elbow is locked, your forearm and your bicep can't work separately, right? So you've got to have that elbow relaxed. Okay, and the fourth thing to remember, which is of course related to that, is you not only want to have your elbow flexible enough to move, but you want to have your other joints being flexible as well. So you want to have a flexible wrist, you want to allow your wrist to move, and you want to allow your fingers to move. Now, at first, especially if you're a beginner, your hand may be kind of locked. It might be a bit of a claw when you're playing and you find it impossible to do things like this, okay? But the easiest thing to remember is that you've got to have a flexible pinky, okay? If your pinky is locked, and I have, videos about the bow hand, I probably should do more, but if your pinky is locked, that's going to lock pretty much all this up. If you lock that pinky, your pinky should be bent on top of your bow, right? Just like this. The pinky is the only finger where the tip of the finger goes on top of the bow. If you can keep that pinky bent, now it acts as a shock absorber, right? So that's going to allow the rest of your fingers to move more freely. It's going to allow that wrist to bend, and it's going to work in conjunction with your elbow. So really, as far as keeping all of this relaxed, the biggest culprit that is a big challenge to people is that they lock this pinky. Just relax that pinky. If it feels like you're going to drop your bow, good. You're probably holding your bow right. Remember, you're guiding your bow. It's not a club. You're just guiding it on the instrument, okay? So keep that pinky relaxed. Okay, so there's 2 simple exercises that you can use every day when you're warming up or right before you practice or whatever that'll help you use your arm properly. If you're not using your arm properly right now and you're having a hard time with tension or whatever it is, I have 2 really simple exercises that's going to retrain your body to use those joints better, okay? So the first one is you can just play slow open strings, and you'll do, maybe 4 bow strokes on each string. Doesn't really matter, but the point is that you go nice and slow, keeping in mind the rules of the bow arm, right? So for example, if I'm on the A string, right, I've got my bent pinky, I'm initiating the stroke with my bicep, and then I'm completing it with the forearm. And I watch really closely. I'm going to try to keep the bow in between the bridge and the fingerboard. Right? Now I'm thinking forearm, then bicep. The bicep moves all the way up. You should feel it right in here. You should feel, when you complete the stroke on the up bow, you should feel that joint right there completing that stroke. You're going to move that whole bicep up, right? Forearm and bicep. Move that bicep to complete the stroke and keep your hand the same. Okay, bicep, forearm. Okay. Forearm, bicep, bicep, forearm. And you're focusing on keeping that bow in the right spot. Okay? And you could do like say 4 bow strokes each string, and it's important that you do all the strings and use the metronome. Right? So you can put the metronome on, 62 beats per minute or whatever, and you put 4 beats per bow, for example. So it'll be like that. Dunk, 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 right? Then try the D string. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? It's just really simple. You're just training that hand how to operate properly. And if you want to do something more advanced, then just, use your scale, right? Just use a really simple scale. 2, 3, 4. 2. Complete the stroke with your bicep. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Okay? If you have patience and you use those exercises when you're warming up, it's a great way to warm up, you can retrain that arm to work properly. Okay, so now that's one exercise that you can do, but there's another exercise that's very basic, but It's meant for people who are having just a really hard time getting that elbow to open up. You know, some people when they play the bow, it just wants to do that and they just have a really hard time getting that elbow to relax so they can use it. So here's a little trick that you can do. It's an old trick, but it works. So what you want to do is actually put your arm against the wall when you're practicing, okay? Now this is not going to replicate a perfect bow arm, but what it is going to do is it's going to prevent that bicep from moving. So you'll be forced to use only your forearm. You might even have to move your violin a little bit to do the full stroke. So basically what you're doing is you're using the entire time you're using your bow, you're not using your bicep at all. You're only using your forearm. And it's probably easiest just to use open strings. Okay, so once you have that motion, right, so you've trained that elbow to move, now you can go back to the other exercise. You can switch back and forth. Right? So you've trained this elbow right here. You can feel the joint. You've trained it to move. So now you can go back to your other exercise. Okay? So with those two exercises, really you can train your arm very successfully to move properly. The biggest thing is that when you're practicing, don't practice too fast. Make sure you don't practice any faster than your mind is able to monitor what your body is doing. But just remember, you know, your arm is basically two pieces. You have your bicep and your forearm. They work at specific times, and then you just train yourself to use both of those parts well. Now, after a while, you'll get very fluid. Now, obviously, when we're bowing, we don't want to be like, right? Not like that. So eventually, you'll become fluid in your motions, but you will be using all of your joints in concert with each other to produce that really fluid bow arm that is in control of your contact point. And then you will be in control of your sound. So guys, I hope I was of some help today. You know, the biggest reason why I'm doing a lot of these videos is people are asking me questions and they want me to answer their questions. So, you know, I'm kind of curious about today's video. What kind of challenges that you guys have, you know, with playing with a straight bow? Let me know down below, you know, if you want any clarification of some points, just, you know, like I say, let me know. I answer, you know, most of the comments and whatnot that are on the YouTube videos. And of course, you know, if you like the content, just don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click that alert bell so you get a notification when I create a new video. I'm doing pretty much at least one video every week. And, you know, don't forget, you know, here at Kennedy Violins, you know, we're all players and teachers. So we're always happy to answer any kind of your questions anytime. Thanks, guys.